Day 2. The next morning, Mason woke up with a deep frown, rubbing his arms as though warding off a lingering chill. "I had strange dreams," he murmured, his voice unusually quiet. "There was something outside, watching us." Jake forced a laugh, but it was thin, brittle. "It's just paranoia. We're in the middle of nowhere. It's normal to feel a little on edge." Mason didn't respond right away. He glanced toward the fogged-up window, his fingers tightening into fists. "Maybe," he said at last. But the doubt in his voice unsettled them all. Despite the creeping unease, they stuck to their plans. Leo and Mason hiked up a small hill to take photos, the wind slicing through the trees in eerie, whistling moans. The sky had turned an oppressive gray, clouds hanging too low, as though pressing down on the forest itself. Even the trees seemed stiffer, their skeletal branches stretching like clawed fingers toward the dimming light. Jake and Sam stayed behind to chop wood, the rhythmic crack of the axe a stark contrast to the eerie silence. The usual sounds of the forest, chirping birds, rustling leaves, were gone. Even the distant murmur of a stream seemed muffled, as though the world beyond their cabin was holding its breath. Inside, Cassie and Erin sifted through the cabin's dust-laden shelves, the air thick with the scent of old wood, damp earth, and something faintly metallic. When they pulled out a forgotten book of local legends, its cracked leather cover crumbling beneath their fingers, they shared a wary glance. The pages, stiff with age, whispered as they turned them. The stories spoke of disappearances, campers vanishing without a trace, remote cabins left abandoned with fires still burning in their hearths. Strange lights in the woods. Whispers carried on the wind. Cassie laughed, though the sound was hollow. "This is straight out of a bad horror movie." Erin smiled faintly, but her eyes lingered on a passage about figures seen just beyond the firelight watching, waiting. By afternoon, the unease had spread like a sickness. Sam admitted he'd felt watched while chopping wood. Leo, usually skeptical, nodded in agreement. "It's like something is just there, right at the edge of your vision. But when you look, it's gone." Mason's unease had hardened into silence. The air, once crisp and clean, now carried a weight, thick and stagnant. Shadows beneath the trees stretched unnaturally, their edges too sharp, too deep. The light faded too soon, the sky swallowing what little warmth remained. When twilight arrived, it was sudden, unnatural, as if the sun had been snuffed out rather than set. That night, the cabin felt smaller, as though the darkness outside was pressing inward. The air held an unsettling dampness, the scent of moss and rot curling in the corners. The fire, though burning strong, seemed weaker, its light struggling against the encroaching night. Shadows trembled along the walls, curling and shifting like living things. Then came the scratching. At first, it was barely perceptible, a faint, scraping sound that could have been dismissed as the wind rattling a loose shingle. But the wind had stopped. The trees outside stood eerily still. The noise grew, slow, deliberate strokes against the wood. Testing. Searching. The sound of something dragging along the walls, moving from one side of the cabin to the next. Cassie gripped her mug of cocoa, her knuckles pale. "That's just a branch, right?" Her voice wavered, brittle as cracked ice. Jake swallowed, his throat dry. "Yeah, just a branch." No one moved. No one breathed. Outside, the scratching stopped. Silence swallowed them whole. And then, a single, deliberate knock. Night 2. Cassie was the first to scream. A raw, gut-wrenching sound that split the silence like a knife, reverberating through the cabin's wooden walls. They burst into her room, their hearts hammering, adrenaline surging. Cassie was crumpled in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. Her wide, tear-filled eyes were locked on the empty space near the window. "It was in my room," she whispered, barely able to force the words out. "A figure tall, watching me." Her fingers clutched at the floorboards, nails scraping as if she were trying to anchor herself to reality. The others followed her gaze, but there was nothing, just the pale, shifting glow of moonlight filtering through the swaying trees outside. They searched every inch of the cabin, flinging open doors, peering under beds, even braving the cold night air to check the shadows stretching between the trees. But there was nothing. Only the wind, whistling through the forest like a hushed, mocking laugh. Still, Sleep was impossible. Then the scratching returned. More deliberate this time, long, dragging strokes against the wooden walls. The kind that sent a slow, creeping dread slithering through their veins. The noise burrowed into their skulls. A pause. Then again. Closer. A knock followed. Just one. Sharp. Confident. Then another. A pattern. Rhythmic. Calculated. As if whoever or whatever was outside wasn't just trying to get in. It was playing with them. Their breaths came in short, shallow bursts. No one dared to move. Then, the whispers. At first, they were barely there, like the wind threading through dead leaves. But soon, the sounds twisted, taking form, low, slithering syllables that curled around the cabin like unseen fingers. The words were impossible to understand, but their intent was clear. Malicious. Beckoning. The fire in the hearth flickered violently, flames stretching unnaturally high before guttering low, casting grotesque shadows that stretched and warped along the walls. The temperature plummeted. Their breath fogged in the dim firelight. The floorboards groaned, not with the casual settling of an old cabin, but as if something heavy pressed down upon them. A slow, measured weight shifting from one point to another. And then, from the darkness beyond the window, a breath. Slow. Deliberate. Wet against the glass. Not the wind. Not an animal. Something watching. Something waiting.